Mazda Miata RF? Toyota 86. Comparison? Comparison! Ah.
Did we just convince them that we can do this? I think we did. That's awesome. Well, you know what? Here we are at the track, and I don't know what people are complaining about with the Toyota 86. It's being underpowered. You know what? I have one of these. Back when they were a Scion FRS, I bought one, and I absolutely love it. And 5 years later, I still love the new version of the car. It is so much fun, and it is a complete blast, especially on the track here.
And you know what, man? I totally agree with you, especially about the whole underpowered thing. I've thought that's been overblown since day one, and especially nowadays. I mean, 205 horsepower coming out of that 2-liter boxer engine, that's plenty, and that's about 50 more horsepower than the Miata, and you never hear anyone complaining about the Miata being underpowered. I don't know where this comes from, but it's really, really bizarre.
All right, well, you know what? I will say that they still nailed it in the handling department for this car. We can talk about the power in a little bit, but let's just talk about the steering in this car, which is superb. And you know what? You brought up that MX-5 that you brought here today, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Toyota 86 has better steering than that Miata by miles.
You know what? I don't think you're wrong, but personally, I like the feel of the Miata's steering just a little bit more. I find it's just a little bit more communicative, and it's a little bit more responsive. There's a little bit more turn-in response, and I think that's less to do with the steering and more to do with the fact that the wheels are just a little bit closer to the corners, so it makes it respond just that much more quickly to turn in.
All right, well, you know what? The next thing I want to bring up, though, in this car, the brakes and the tires, the grip. In the 86, it's not quite as, it's not quite there like it is in the Miata. This car is really held back by those two factors, and Mazda, full credit to them, they put some good tires and good brakes on that vehicle, and you can really tell the difference when you compare these two cars back to back.
Yeah, definitely. There's just a little bit less grip here in the tires, and absolutely the brakes are just a little bit softer right out of the box, which means the more time you spend out here on the track, the quicker you wear down those pads.
So basically the car ends up being a DIY sports car as you need it, but out of the box, it's a pretty solid performing vehicle, and that limitation of the tires, it ends up making the car really fun on the track. It slides around a lot. It's not going to be the fastest thing, but it's going to teach you how to use a rear-wheel drive sports car effectively. It's going to teach you about proper car balance and teach you how to use momentum with a vehicle. Instead of, having a high horsepower vehicle that you can just stomp your foot down and end up going from corner to corner.
And yeah, when you trace the lineage of a car like this back through the decades, that's exactly what it is. This is sort of a teaching tool. I mean, this is a really well-balanced sports car. It's rear-wheel drive. That's obviously the trickiest configuration to drive when you want to take it to the track and maximize the performance of your car. So this thing is great to learn in, but it's also great for an experienced driver. You've owned your car for almost 5 years now, and you said you still enjoy it as much today as you did when you bought it because it's a great car.
Yeah, it really sets a high benchmark for me. Okay, well, you know what? I think we should take a look at what you've got under the hood of that MX-5 and see how these two really compare. And if you think that you can truly have more fun in a Miata than this really cool, edgy Toyota.
Sammy, there's only one way to find out. Okay, so I know we're talking about affordable sports cars here, but I say screw the budget. I mean, this thing is only a few grand more than the 86, but look at what you get. This is the prototypical sports car of our generation. And I would argue that regardless of price, this is probably the best sports car you've been able to buy for the last 30 years. It's got all the ingredients that make a great sports car. It's well balanced, it's agile, it's nimble, and the good news is this retractable hardtop does absolutely nothing to change that.
Actually, I find the hardtop model to be more attractive than the softtop model.
I would agree with that. It's pretty good looking.
But I will say that this car is lacking in one very important thing when compared to the 86.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
That's room. The 86 not only had rear seats that you could throw some of your stuff in, but it also had a very functional trunk.
Yeah, this thing doesn't have either of those, and it also doesn't have a whole lot of headroom. As you can see, I'm pretty cramped in here, you know. This isn't a perfect car for tall people, but I think people of average height or shorter definitely won't have any issues. You know, the headroom issue is the only reason I haven't gone out and bought one of these things yet. Well, that and my wife.
Well, maybe your wife sat in the passenger seat and she saw how cramped it is for the passenger's legs as well.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of room on that side either. But really, in a car like this, are we talking about cargo room and passenger room, or are we talking about how it performs?
All right, then talk to me about how it performs. This engine really surprised me with the way that it responded, and it felt really powerful, even though it's apparently down something like 50 horsepower compared to what's in the Toyota.
Yeah, they use the same 2 liters of displacement. This thing is an inline 4, whereas yours is a horizontally opposed 4. But regardless, it's the same relative size. Yet this thing does make 50 less horsepower, but you wouldn't notice it. And Sammy, you have to admit that when we were on the front straight, not only was I able to keep up with you, but I was actually able to pass you. And if I didn't slack off there towards turn 1, I would have been past you within the first half a mile out here.
Sure, I think you're just making excuses and you didn't have enough power, but I will agree that the gearbox is a really important part of this car, and as you can see, you're changing gears a lot more often than I was. It's a much more closer ratio gearbox than what you find in the 86.
Absolutely, that is true, and that is part of the reason why it performs so well. It runs through the gears so quickly. This gearbox is also so crisp. It is one of my favorite gearboxes on the market, regardless of segment. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about sports cars, compact cars, commuter cars, you name it, it's just absolutely spectacular. It feels great in my right hand, the clutch feels great under my left foot. There is absolutely nothing to complain about here.
One of the things I have noticed in the two cars, there's a very different way the traction control systems operate.
Definitely this one is a little bit more overbearing and involved when traction control is engaged. You notice it working, and right when you get to that limit and you think, hey, it might just kick out the rear end, it tightens everything up and swings it back, and as you know, that's pretty hard on the brakes when you're already putting them through quite a bit. Whereas the Toyota, in that track mode, I mean, it's a lot more playful, but it's like supervised playtime, let's say. It lets you push things just a little bit further. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is the brakes. And I will say that when it comes to the Toyota 86, that is a soft spot, both literally and figuratively. When you look at these optional Brembo brakes on the Miata, they're absolutely bulletproof. We've been out here all day. I've thrown all kinds of hard braking, twists and turns, tight corners, you name it. There's absolutely no heat soak or brake fade to speak of. The pedal's still super firm under my foot. I think I could be out here for another day without any issues, whereas the 86, it was after a handful of laps, it started to feel a little bit like stepping in a bowl of oatmeal.
So honestly, Sammy, what did you think?
Honestly, Dan, with all the madness in the world today, I'm just glad we had a fun time together.
Me too, Sammy. Me too. Seriously though, the Mazda's a better car, right?
Yeah. Whatever you say, Dan.
Yeah, you could be here all day. That is until you realize that you've got only 7 kilometers left to take.
That could be a problem, and I think maybe we should wrap it up.
That sounds like a good idea. What do you think?
I think it's just because it's sloshing around.
Sure.
No, maybe not. It's just
Good? We're good?
I think so.
I think we're